Yesterday's email from Tuesday morning revealed a woman named Sarah Mason, who is the wife of Richard Mason, the CEO of Mason Advertising Agency in Manhattan, where my wife Allison works as a senior vice president. Her message was direct. I'm writing to inform you that your wife has been having an affair with my husband for over a year. She provided evidence to support her claim, including their private messages and photographs taken at hotels and restaurants. Initially, I struggled to comprehend the information. Upon opening the attached photos, however, I understood the truthfulness of her claims. This wasn't the work of an irrational, jealous person or a foolish prank. The file was completed, meticulously put together. In the initial shot, Allison and Richard were seated at a table in a modest Manhattan eatery. The second image showed them exiting a Hamptons hotel. The third picture captured them strolling on a beach. The photograph's timestamp read last August. For over a year, Allison had been concealing an affair from me while making a fool out of me. At the letter's base, there was one more brief line. In 3 weeks, our company is hosting a corporate event to conclude the year. Don't attempt to confront anyone, it's futile. Attend the party and you'll receive something unexpected. My initial thought was the predictable one, it's fabricated. Somebody intended to hurt me, to intrude into another person's life and create discord between us. Today, forging photos like that with artificial intelligence is as simple as can be. I closed the laptop, reclined in my chair, and attempted to recollect my recent history with my spouse. I recollected her gradual withdrawal from me, the way she ceased inquiring about my workday, a routine we once shared during dinner conversations. Instead, she began to show irritation over minor household matters, an item misplaced, a glance at an inconvenient time. Frequently, she'd mockingly remark that I had grown dull. Previously, I attributed it to her fatigue. Believing her work was stressful and demanding, I thought she was going through a tough phase. I rationalized that such occurrences were common in long-term relationships, a sign of the midlife crisis. Now I realized my obliviousness, but I refused to accept someone else's stories. I yearned for a direct observation. On Wednesday morning, I waited until Allison began her preparations, intending to witness it all firsthand. Inquiring about her return time while she applied makeup, I suggested a dinner outing after work. Allison, not looking at me, replied she'd be swamped today due to an urgent project and excessive workload, implying she'd be working late. I nodded in understanding before she dashed off. Post-work hours, I parked outside the Mason Agency in Manhattan, where Allison worked. Ascending to her floor, I navigated the quiet, nearly empty office. Darkness filled Allison's glass-walled office, and I approached 2 remaining employees to inquire about Allison Walker, the senior vice president. The man and the young woman lifted their eyes from their screens, exchanging a glance. The man remarked that Allison had departed 30 minutes earlier. Odd, I mused. I assumed she'd work late as usual. The young woman smirked. You jest. She seldom stays beyond normal office hours. Typically, she dines late at the nearby eatery opposite. Ah, I see, was my response. I bid them farewell and made for the exit. Thus, there were no pressing tasks or major assignments. She had merely dismissed me that morning politely to spare her evening. I exited the air-conditioned office building onto the bustling weekday street, crossed the road, and ushered open the heavy restaurant door of glass. Inside, it was relatively crowded for a midweek. Almost all tables near the large windows were occupied by corporate employees in suits. Soft jazz played softly, and servers navigated through the rows with their trays. I ambled slowly towards the room's rear, feigning a search for an empty chair. My gaze instinctively scanned the attendees' faces. I was secretly wishing to spot Allison with her colleagues from work, but there were no familiar faces present. Instead, in the distant corner, at a small table adorned with lush greenery, sat my wife. She had discarded her formal work jacket, leaving only a delicate silk blouse. Opposite her was Richard Mason, resplendent in a pristine gray suit. They were engrossed in dinner, a private duo. A partially consumed bottle of white wine and some hors d'oeuvres stood between them. Mason spoke to her in a quiet, eager tone, occasionally leaning forward and making animated gestures. Allison listened, offered a soft smile, and twirled the stem of her glass. A sense of unease stirred within me. Earlier that day, she had concocted an impromptu excuse about pressing deadlines and a crucial project that would delay her return from work. In essence, she had dismissed me to enjoy a peaceful dinner with her superior. I could have stormed their table, stirred up a fuss, and sought an explanation. But what would that accomplish? Allison would come up with excuses, Mason would chime in, and within no time this situation would escalate into another family dispute. Still, I wouldn't have learned the specifics of Sarah Mason's plans, so I departed the restaurant and returned home. The gathering was barely over 2 weeks away. Allison arrived home close to midnight. I was idly browsing on my phone in the living room. She strolled into the room, discarding her shoes, and plopped onto the couch. "Dreadful day, exhausted from all the reports," she murmured. "I dropped by your office this evening," I remarked without looking up from the screen. She stood still in the room upon learning you were dining with your supervisor at the nearby eatery. A long silence filled the space before Allison gathered herself. "What's it to you?" she retorted curtly. "Indeed, I was with Richard, just a routine business dinner. We were going over the budget for the upcoming quarter. And as for you, it appears you took it upon yourself to snoop on me. Is that really how you choose to spend your time?" "This is pathetic." She released an exasperated sigh, folded her arms across her chest, and took a step closer. "Seeing as you caught us regardless, I suppose you might as well know the full story. In fact, I welcome it. Soon, my life will undergo significant changes, and you'd best not interfere. Richard is leaving his wife for me. We have already made our plans." She spoke with certainty, flashing a self-satisfied smile, as if she had just claimed the grandest prize of her existence. Approaching the year's end, the much-anticipated party drew nearer, only a few days remaining. At home, Allison and I barely exchanged words, as if she was already immersed in the new life Richard had promised her. I decided to let her have it without interference. Upon returning from work one evening, an email from Sarah Mason awaited me in my inbox, inviting me personally to the Mason Agency's corporate event. In my response, I shared with Sarah my discussion with my wife. "I found your wife with Richard at a restaurant. At home, she claimed their relationship was severe and Richard would soon abandon his family for her. 10 minutes later, I received a response from Sarah. It was clear that she intimately knew the details of their marriage. 'Richard is too cowardly to leave me,' Sarah wrote. 'More importantly, it's not in his interest. He fully comprehends what he stands to lose in a divorce. Your wife is just another passing romance for him. In all these years, he has never once left any of his mistresses. If she believes his words, she is making a grave mistake.' She added one more thing. 'Attend the party and you'll receive an unexpected surprise.' I reread the message and shut my laptop. The situation was crystal clear. Richard Mason was regaling my wife with tales that countless gullible individuals before her had already heard, while Sarah seemed to be patiently waiting for the opportune moment to close the trap. In the end, the day of the party arrived. First thing in the morning, Allison began preparing herself. She summoned a taxi and headed to an upscale beauty salon in Manhattan to prepare for the night ahead. She returned home around evening, dressed in a long gown, her hair and makeup immaculate. Standing before the full-length mirror in the hallway, she inspected herself from every angle, adjusting the hem of her dress. Her smile revealed her anticipation of an extraordinary event tonight. My wife was unaware that a pressed suit hung in my wardrobe, along with an invitation from her boss's wife tucked away in its pocket. As Allison left, grabbing her handbag, she tossed me a casual farewell. "I might not come home at all tonight. Don't wait up for me." I nodded and replied softly, "Go. This evening is bound to be exceptional for you." Allison hesitated in the doorway for a moment before continuing on her way, not asking for clarification of my words. Without a word, she merely shrugged, exited the apartment, and made her way to the taxi waiting below. Once the vehicle had turned the corner, I returned to the apartment, retrieved my suit from the closet. The opulent ballroom in Manhattan was bustling with people. Entering with my invitation, I grabbed a glass from a waiter's tray and blended into the sea of guests. I scanned the crowd and spotted Allison. She was vibrant, frequently smiling, and tried to stay close to Richard Mason, occasionally circling near his private table or slipping into his conversations with important clients. Her gaze suddenly fell upon me. Her smile instantly vanished, replaced by a look of surprise. "Why are you here?" she whispered angrily, casting furtive glances around. "Why did you come? How on earth did you manage to get in?" I explained that I was invited and calmly took a sip of wine. Perplexed, Allison stared puzzled. It remained unclear who had extended the invitation for this night or the reason behind it, but there was no chance for inquiry. The host initiated the formal proceedings, redirecting the room's focus towards the stage. Richard Mason ascended accompanied by his wife. Throughout the evening, Mason deliberately displayed an image of content family life, never straying far from Sarah. He grabbed the microphone, scanning the crowd, and commenced his congratulatory speech. Subsequently, he spoke extensively about the business, sharing insights on the challenging year they experienced. Finally, expressing warmth and sincerity, he acknowledged his wife, describing their shared journey, expressing gratitude for her unwavering support, and highlighting her significant role in his achievements. To the thunderous applause of the audience, he pulled Sarah close and affectionately placed an arm around her shoulders. I glanced at Allison, standing slightly ahead of me. She remained motionless, clutching a glass, gazing fixedly at the stage. A triumphant smile on her face gradually faded, replaced by a heavy despair. Her domineering partner showed no signs of contemplating divorce or abandoning his family. In full view of numerous coworkers, he was enthusiastically enacting the part of the ideal, content husband. The climax of the event arrived with the central toast. The host declared that Mason's wife wished to speak a few words. Instantly, the room fell silent, and all eyes turned towards the stage, anticipating customary heartfelt messages for her husband and the gathering. Richard Mason smirked, feeling proud, raising his glass with a haughty air. Allison stood slightly aside, maintaining a composed demeanor as she closely observed the stage. Sarah Mason grasped the microphone with assurance and, sporting a casual smile, acknowledged all guests for their attendance. After a brief pause, she declared that this evening was indeed extraordinary, and with everyone present, she had something to share. "I wish to toast my husband," she announced, fixing her gaze on Richard, "to the most steadfast man I've ever known. For countless years, he remained faithful to me and remarkably managed to be faithful to several other women this past year." The room fell silent. Sarah, calm as ever, surveyed the guests and continued, "I want to express my gratitude towards them for making my husband's challenging year more bearable by generously offering their time and effort." Her measured voice filled the chilled room, making each word resonate. She paused before adding, "I would like to specifically thank our Senior Vice President of Marketing, Allison Walker. Allison, step forward. Your peers should witness the one who worked tirelessly more than any other." In that instant, numerous gazes turned towards my wife, who stood motionless. Sarah's face turned pale while her hand holding the glass shook visibly. Continuing with an unyielding smile, she said, "Allison was exceptionally devoted to my husband, often accompanying him to weekend trips to country resorts and the Hamptons. A true company loyalist, wouldn't you agree, dear? That dedication is why we chose to promote her last quarter, correct?" Trying to intervene, Mason's face turned red and he demanded through gritted teeth, "Sarah, cease this immediately." However, Sarah remained unfazed. She gulped down her champagne, handed him the microphone, and strode towards the exit with an air of authority. Richard was left standing alone on stage. The massive banquet hall hung heavy with silence, as guests were at a loss for words and unsure how to respond to the unexpected turn of events. Allison stood frozen in the middle of the room, still clutching her glass stem tightly, as if it offered the only support preventing her from collapsing. Moments prior, Mason appeared invincible, but now he's desperately calling someone as his reputation and career disintegrate in public view. Allison cast a silent gaze towards me, seeming to expect my approach, words, or action. I remained motionless, merely returning her stare before departing toward the coat check. New York hummed with holiday activity, a light snowfall blanketing the city, and a taxi idled at the entrance. Climbing into the backseat, I provided the driver my destination. Shortly after, my phone vibrated with an incoming call from Allison. Ignoring the call and setting it to silent, I sought solace in the tranquil silence of my home. After settling there, I approached the window and gazed upon the twinkling night city lights. Removed the wedding ring from my finger and placed it on the nightstand. An hour later, Allison entered the apartment, stopping at the bedroom doorway. In semi-darkness, her eyes immediately focused on the table where the wedding ring faintly gleamed under the street light. "Ethan," her voice cracked, becoming thin and raspy. "Ethan, please, let's talk. I really need you now." She moved forward, extending her hands towards me as if trying to resurrect the past she herself had shattered. I stood still. "You said that everything in your life was going to change and I should stay out of it," I responded. "I'm not obstructing you. There's nothing left between us to discuss, Allison." I turned away and left her alone. Leaving the snowy street behind, I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs with the cold night air. As Tara had predicted that night, I received something unexpected. She hadn't lied. I was completely liberated. How did you feel about this plot surprise? Your opinion greatly matters to me. Leave a comment or simply a emoticon if you found the story entertaining. Subscribe, There are numerous other stories waiting to be unveiled.